Hi there, and welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah Peternell, and I'm the owner of Family Nutrition Services in Denver, Colorado. I have Hashimoto's, and I also have celiac disease. And I can't believe I haven't done a video about the relationship between celiac disease and Hashimoto's. So today is the day. This is a very common case of polyautoimmunity, meaning two types of autoimmune conditions that are usually found together. I want to share some statistics with you today, and also I want to explain the relationship and talk about some of the nutritional things that you can do if you have both celiac disease and Hashimoto's. So thanks for tuning in. I have this like crazy little weird hair thing going on. Okay, all right, so let's see. The first thing we want to just talk about is what is celiac disease? Well, it's an autoimmune disorder that causes inflammation and damage in the lining of the small intestine. And it is triggered exclusively by gluten, which is a protein found in wheat, rye, barley, and other gluten-containing grains. Okay, and you can find a complete list of gluten-containing grains at celiac.org. So, what we already know to be true about Hashimoto's is that it is also autoimmune in nature. And one of the things you probably have discovered by now, if you've been watching my YouTube channel, is that Hashimoto's also tends to have gluten-containing grains as one of the biggest triggers for the developing autoimmunity in the body. So it's not surprising that celiac disease, which is triggered exclusively by gluten and the way that it affects the small intestine, and Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroiditis, which also is known from many research studies to have gluten as a trigger or one of the potential threats to the immune system, which causes that dysregulated immunity and autoimmunity, would go hand in hand. It is also interesting to know that celiac disease and Hashimoto's share a lot of symptoms. So this is where things can get a little bit tricky. Maybe you're going back and forth to different doctor's offices and you're getting a misdiagnosis or a missed diagnosis of either celiac disease or Hashimoto's. Well, this can be a few of the reasons why. For some people, celiac disease is silent celiac, meaning they don't have the typical sort of what we think of as, bathroom problems or explosive diarrhea. Pardon the TMI information there, but that's what most commonly many people, including doctors, think of when they think about celiac disease. They're looking for gastrointestinal symptoms, but many people actually have silent celiac, which can look a lot like some other autoimmune conditions. The number one top thing being fatigue. The majority of newly diagnosed patients with celiac disease first present with symptoms of fatigue, and this is because the gluten protein that's found in gluten-containing grains that is causing the damage to the villi, which are the finger-like projections in the small intestine. This area of the small intestine is being damaged and is less able to absorb nutrition from food and supplements. So a person who's having deficiencies and malabsorption issues is going to be lower in the nutrients that help to support healthy mitochondria within each and every one of our trillions of cells, and that help to produce energy, so we have energy in our healthy body and also in a healthy mind. So fatigue is quite commonly associated with celiac disease, and as we know, sluggish thyroid metabolism as a symptom of Hashimoto's also leads to fatigue, right? So if you've watched some of my other videos, I talk a lot about fatigue. Also, joint pain is another one that a lot of newly diagnosed people with celiac have joint pain before they may present with gastrointestinal symptoms. And we do know, of course, with Hashimoto's, joint pain can also be present, right? It's that inflammation in the small joints that tends to be a part of that overactive, that wonky, dysregulated immune system that's sending all these inflammatory cytokines throughout the body, in particular in the joints. And thirdly, a lot of times there's crossover in the symptoms between these two conditions when it comes to mental health and mood. And a lot of people who are newly diagnosed with celiac disease are dealing with depression or apathy or low motivation or depression or brain fog. Sound familiar? Those of us with Hashimoto's, we certainly know that due to malnutrition, due to the toxic like nature of gluten and gliadin, these proteins in grains that cause this inflammation even in the brain, there can be dysregulation of mood and mental health. And so we see this across both conditions. Research has found that risks of celiac disease substantially increase if you already have Hashimoto's. And conversely, if you already have celiac disease, you are more than 4 times likely to also have Hashimoto's. Given these statistics and risks, some experts recommend that if you have Hashimoto's, you should be routinely screened for celiac disease. So, when I have clients come to my office who tell me that they have Hashimoto's, they have elevated antibodies to the thyroid, their TSH is doing weird things, they have poor levels of free T3 and also some other dysregulated numbers within their blood work that shows they have this autoimmunity going on, one of my first suggestions is to send them back to their doctor and request a celiac Sprue panel, which is going to give them the idea as to whether or not they have elevated tissue transglutaminase antibodies and also probably the anti-gliadin antibodies that would be present in the autoimmune activity in this area of the body, the small intestine, due to the presence of gluten. However, I would like to state that the celiac Sprue panel is no longer the gold standard for celiac disease diagnosis. It used to be that we could say, TTG, do you have the antibodies? You have celiac. That's not so much true anymore. First of all, if you're someone with Hashimoto's and you've already stopped eating gluten, well, by all means, please do not start eating gluten again just to go get this test. A lot of doctors will recommend that you go in for an upper gastrointestinal exam and a scope so that they can take biopsies of the small intestinal tissue right at the duodenum in the very upper part of the small intestine to see if there are inflammatory patches and also that they can confirm that villi damage in the small intestine and therefore definitely give you a diagnosis of celiac disease. In my opinion, that is quite an invasive procedure, and while it may be helpful in some cases, it's also very difficult in this very long portion of the intestine to guarantee that the person who is taking these samples and looking at the pathology under the microscope after the fact is going to be conclusive in their discovery of the right types of cells and patches of inflammation to give you the information as to whether or not this is celiac disease. I see this happen all the time where my clients' upper GI tests and scopes and biopsies come back inconclusive. So in my opinion, the best way to go about finding out if celiac disease is a risk for you is to take a genetic test. So we know that there are a number of different HLA genes that can point to whether or not a person has a predisposition for celiac disease. What we find in a lot of cases is that individuals with Hashimoto's may have some of the gluten intolerant non-celiac genes, but of course, like in my case, also the celiac genes may be present. And so if you have celiac genes and you have Hashimoto's, my advice is to treat yourself like you have celiac disease, because you want to not just be following a gluten-free diet, you want to be following a gluten zero diet. No gluten at all, because the last thing we want to do is have these genes present, and even if tissue transglutaminase is negative, to be consuming occasional gluten, which is poking those genes and eventually probably going to turn them on to full-blown celiac disease. So I do work with many clients who, they want to go gluten-free. They decide it's a, difficult but worthwhile lifestyle change. And then when they get their genetic test back for these HLA genes and they see the definitive proof, yep, you're right, I'm at a greater risk. It kind of seals the deal for being able to go 100% gluten-free for the long term. So that's what I suggest, and that's what I did for myself, and that's what I did for my family, and especially my kids, because I'm adopted, and so I can't look to first-degree relatives, like parents or biological siblings, even grandmas and grandpas, to let me know if there's a family history of something like gluten intolerance and celiac disease. So sure enough, I have the celiac genes, I have the gluten intolerant genes, and my husband has some gluten intolerant genes, but not celiac, thankfully. So when we rolled the dice and had our family, both of my children, Clay and Molly, ended up with 1 copy each of gluten intolerant genes. So they're not at risk of celiac disease, but Clay especially, he's like a canary in a coal mine. He eats one little normal pretzel or a piece of gluten crust on a pizza, and that boy ends up with eczema. Molly, for her, it's more behavioral, mood, energy, right? We see kind of how this plays out in our kiddos in a variety of different ways. And really, truly, for neither one of them, it's not extreme digestive issues. Anyway, for what it's worth, on my own anecdotal part of today's video, my kids are gluten-free because we know they have gluten intolerant genes, but also luckily, thankfully, we know that they won't be at risk of developing celiac disease at any point in their lifetime. All right, let me go back to a couple more things. I skipped over some of the kind of high-tech gene disposition stuff that I had planned to share today, but I actually have an amazing and very long blog post on this very subject on my website at sarahpeternell.com, and I'll put that in the description down below. So if you do want to get into kind of looking at how these genes interact, you can do so. And if you also decide to do a 23andMe and get your raw data, it might help you to interpret that a little bit better. But the best thing you can do if you're curious about your nutrigenomics and the ways in which your genes, plus your diet and your lifestyle, play a role in the way that you feel in any conditions that you have, you can work with me. And I love to do gene analysis. And we can do that to see what types of predispositions, risks you have, and also what types of risks you may be passing on to your offspring. All right, little digression there. So, see, I'm about to sneeze now. I try to do my videos in one take. I do not want to press pause, but I've got the sunlight shining on my face and it's making me feel like I'm about to sneeze. Do you ever have that happen? Okay. It passed. All right, so as we know, typical with autoimmune disorders, you've heard me talk about this quite a lot, which is polyautoimmunity, more than one autoimmune disease. People with celiac disease and Hashimoto's are more likely to develop a secondary autoimmune condition. So in addition to these two going, together, celiac and Hashimoto's, having one or the other might also predispose you to type 1 diabetes, Addison's disease, which is of the adrenals, also rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Sjogren's syndrome, autoimmune hepatitis, and more. The older you get, the more your risks for developing more than one autoimmune condition increase, right? So doing what we can at the root cause is very important. There are similarities between the two types of antibodies in celiac disease, which, as I said, is called TTG or tissue transglutaminase in the blood, and also the types of thyroid antibodies that a person may have. So again, I'm going to try to not overshare the science. I've been told that sometimes I go down these rabbit holes of cuckoo science information. But what we've found through research, and this is kind of the high point summary, celiac disease and or gluten may affect how the thyroid functions and may contribute to the development of the anti-thyroid antibodies. Basically, here's what the deal is. The gluten binds to thyroid tissue, and it also binds to thyroid receptor sites throughout your entire body. Have you watched my most watched video on YouTube called Why You Should Stop Eating Gluten If You Have Hashimoto's? Maybe go back and rewatch that one. That will cover the molecular mimicry for you to help explain how Hashimoto's anti-thyroid antibodies may develop in the presence of gluten. So I will kind of skip over that for now. But let's talk about what we can do nutritionally, yay, my favorite part of the video, If you do happen to have maybe the risk factors genetically, or if you have symptoms that may be crossing over into these two categories, or if you have a dual diagnosis like I do, well, the very first thing, obviously, is to stop eating gluten 100%. There was a 2018 study from quite a while back, I guess, 34 women with Hashimoto's. And they were divided into two groups. One of the groups was a gluten-free diet and the other was not. And after 6 months, women on the gluten-free diet had reduced levels of thyroid antibodies, while the other group had no noticeable change. So this study, I just think is interesting. Plain and simple, that's just saying whether you know you have celiac disease or not, if you're eating gluten and you have Hashimoto's, stop. And we can start to see some improvement in your thyroid. Okay, the other thing is that let's see. You may also have a condition called non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which is not actually celiac disease, but symptoms may resolve by going on a gluten-free diet and may also improve your Hashimoto's just by simply removing gluten, whether it's celiac or not. Is that confusing or what? So it kind of basically just says what I just said. If you have Hashimoto's, stop eating gluten. If you have celiac disease, stop eating gluten. If you have both, you definitely need to stop eating gluten. So gluten sensitivity is similar to celiac disease. This is kind of like what I was saying about clay. The antibodies are not found for celiac disease, the tissue transglutaminase, but there is probably symptoms, there may be some cross reaction, there's probably some intestinal damage, and there may be some autoimmune types of issues going on in the body. If you're diagnosed with celiac disease, your doctor will definitely tell you that by going on a gluten-free diet, you can fix your disease. But that's just the first step in a multi-step approach to healing from celiac disease. So you have to do more than just stop eating gluten. You have to allow some time for your intestines to heal, and you have to help it along with a healthy diet. So in addition to being gluten-free, you may want to eliminate some of the other highly antigenic foods like maybe dairy, soy, corn, maybe nuts, or maybe some other animal proteins for a while, and also maybe some other grains while you're allowing your digestive system to heal. We call this part the elimination phase in treating and healing celiac disease. By giving up a variety of additional potential antigenic foods, we're basically just letting all of that inflammation calm down at the gut level. That can be very helpful. So sometimes a person who gives up gluten but is still eating some of these other inflammatory foods, including dairy, may still be showing some of those same old signs and symptoms of celiac disease. So with celiac disease, you're probably going to have to work with someone certified in holistic nutrition, board certified in holistic nutrition, to help you understand what specific nutrients you may need if you've been suffering from a long period of maldigestion, malabsorption, and malnutrition. So again, working with someone like me and taking some of the available micronutrient tests, such as the SpectraCell or the NutriEval or an organic acids test, can all be very helpful in understanding where your deficiencies lie and help to customize the appropriate dose and length of time for repletion of the most important nutrients that are going to not only just help to heal your digestive system, but also to help you heal systemically, like with some of the things like brain fog or joint pain or fatigue or skin issues and so on and so forth. Probably you're going to need to work with your practitioner to help to strengthen your overall digestive health and wellness. This may entail using some enzymes or hydrochloric acid or intrinsic factor to help ensure that you're really getting the most nutritional bang for every bite and for every buck that you spend on your supplements. And then also there can be some demulcent or healing types of herbs that really go in to seal and heal. It's like a little hug on your intestines. If you have celiac disease, maybe things like aloe vera or marshmallow or slippery elm. Some of these types of herbs that go in, they provide mucilaginous structure, they help to bring the epithelial tissue back together again, and they help to promote a stronger, more integral intestinal barrier that is no longer going to be basically leaking antigens and protein fragments into the bloodstream. So very important to consider this whole approach to healing the gut if you have celiac disease. This is going to help you feel better, hands down. It's also going to help to reduce inflammation, not just systemically, but in your thyroid as well. And if you do take thyroid medication like Synthroid, levothyroxine, or Armour, or some other type of thyroid medication, you may be able to better absorb your medication, and you may find that you need a smaller dose. So you'll be working with your endocrinologist or your prescribing physician to basically work with that and tweak it if necessary after you've undergone some gut healing as well. So a lot of people say, God, I don't want to go gluten-free. It's just so hard. I don't want to live like that. Well, let me tell you, I think today it's pretty easy. I first found out that I had celiac disease when I was 30 years old. That was a long time ago. And things were kind of hard. Celiac was lesser known. Gluten-free foods were less available. And also they were expensive. If you went into a restaurant and said, I need gluten-free, they might say, oh, are you a vegetarian? Or they maybe understood dairy-free. It was difficult, right? You had to really make a case. What is gluten? What could it be contained in? May I speak to the chef? I found that it was a headache going out to dinner with me. Today, restaurants nearly across the country have dedicated gluten-free menus, sometimes gluten-free fryers for certain types of foods that they cook. They may use gluten-free cooking utensils and pans in a dedicated area of the kitchen in some restaurants. And chances are either the restaurant owner or the head chef or someone who works in that restaurant knows a celiac, so they know the importance of following certain protocols and helping to ensure that diners in their restaurant who need 100% gluten-free are not getting cross-contaminated. So I have to say, being gluten-free is much easier. Now, cooking gluten-free at home just requires a little bit of work. Cleaning out the pantry, probably going and getting some new things like a fresh cutting board that doesn't have all those little crumbs embedded deep down inside some of the grooves, probably a new toaster, maybe just getting a couple new utensils that maybe look like they've got some pancake batter crusted on the edges that just doesn't want to come off. Starting from scratch, clearing out your kitchen, getting things organized, and having some lists and some recipes of things that will help you to follow a gluten-free diet and to be successful and to feel better is just a few steps away. Working with me or someone like me who's board certified in holistic nutrition really can help take a lot of this guesswork out, provide you those inspirational recipes, give you some methods of cooking, give you some ideas for lunches and breakfasts, because I feel like most people, they just love their bread and they want their toast and sandwiches. Well, we're here to help. So I want to conclude today by basically saying that it's important if you have Hashimoto's to really be considering the possible relationship with celiac disease. Get tested. Make sure that you have a practitioner who understands this relationship and is willing to run a celiac Sprue panel for you right out of the gates when you get your Hashimoto's diagnosis. Then consider working with a holistic nutrition therapist like me. Secondly, get routinely screened. Do some other gut tests. Do some micronutrient tests. Clear out your kitchen, start from scratch, and treat yourself like you have celiac disease if it turns out you have those celiac genes, even if they're not turned on. I hope this video has been helpful for you. Be sure and watch some of my other videos. And be sure to sign up for a free video consultation with me if you're interested in working with me one-on-one to go over all these things I just talked about. My Happy and Healthy Adult program has been reformulated, rebranded, repriced, and is for anyone, anywhere in Denver, anywhere in the US, and anywhere in the world. I enjoy working with my clients so much. I hope that you'll come on board. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.